Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Disciple Hour, episode 4. We are back from our Easter break, and I hope you all had a very good Easter. I sure did. And I am Northern Westman at Western Kind for Christ, and with me are John Malt, Gentile Bear, and Ian. And our topic today is pride, and we are going to examine about a 30-second clip of a gluttonous pastor saying anti-white things. So, John Malt, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, this clip was from 2017, right after the Charlottesville rally, and this pastor just couldn't pass up the opportunity to rag on white people and say that we were not allowed to be proud of being white. The clip is about 30 seconds. Maybe you should just play it.
I will do, and I'll play it.
I'm Irish. I'm Mexican. I'm American. I'm Japanese. That's vain conceit. To be puffed up over something you had no control over. Where you were born, when you were born, you had no control over those things. You didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose your race. You didn't choose your background. God chose it for you. And so it's nothing to be proud of because it's nothing that you've actually done. It was just God's gift to you. And he says, don't do anything out of self-centered pride or vain conceit, but instead in humility, you should treat everyone else better than yourselves. That's what Christians do. You treat everyone else better than yourselves. Each of you should never protect just your own self.
Okay, I think that's about the end now, right?
Yeah, all right.
I couldn't hear it, but anyway.
Oh, okay. Anyway,
It's all right. For anybody who didn't hear, he was saying, this pastor was saying, you cannot be proud of your ethnicity because you didn't earn it. God gave it to you, and you didn't earn it, therefore you can't be proud of it. That was really what he said in that little 30-second clip there. Where to begin? Where to begin? So, pride, first of all, I don't know if that's the right word to be using for it, because what he really meant was not pride in the way that we understand it spiritually. He meant it even broader than that. He meant you're not allowed to be happy for the way you were born. You were born white. You're not allowed to be happy about that. You're not allowed to enjoy that. So it's even different than pride. It's not like idolatry or anything like that. You're not allowed to be happy for being white and want to see your heritage continue. I had thought to kind of give a whole little talk on pride, what it is, and I'm not an ordained minister, but pride, it's been said, is the worst of all sins because it leads to all sins. It leads to all the other sins. Satan fell because he was proud. He wanted to be higher than God. I've heard pride defined in as little as 2 words: self-worship. I don't know if that really covers everything. I think there's a whole lot of examples that you need to see before you understand what pride is and what it isn't. But it's a broad topic. Pride is one of the 7 deadly sins, but it is not one of the 10 commandments. But everybody does understand that pride can be very, very bad in some circumstances. And I'm not going to get into just every circumstance. I'm not going to give an entire theory of pride here. Instead, I want to just address it exactly as this pastor, and I'm sure other pastors, mean it when they say you're not allowed to be proud to be white or Irish or German, for instance, because you, quote, didn't earn it. What they mean is you're not allowed to be happy for being born white and Irish, or white and German, or white and Spanish, or whatever you happen to be born, whatever your heritage and ethnicity are. Because as he says, you didn't earn it. And my first thought is, no, you're right, we didn't earn it, and that's my argument. That's my point. It was given to us by God. In his own words, God made us this way. How dare he expect us to be ashamed of the way God made us? Does he really dare to be ashamed or even just disregard something that God intended for us? He made us white. He intended us to live as Westmen, as white people, amongst our people, with our ways. We have every right to want that and to expect that and to want to see these ways continue. And if somebody comes in and tries to disrupt that and change our ways, we have every right to dislike that and resist it. But he's saying we didn't earn it, therefore we can't be proud of it or even enjoy it in any way or expect just turn over your lands to anybody who wants to come in who is not white, cannot be white, doesn't even want to be white, oftentimes out of spite will, in their words, dismantle everything that is white. So it's really sinister here what these pastors do, some of them, a lot of them, and people don't have a defense for it. They don't know what to say. They haven't really thought it through. I think these pastors are way ahead of them in their attacks. They're planning these rhetorical attacks, these psychological attacks, and most of us have just never encountered them before, so we haven't thought to form a defense. My first defense would be, in your own words, God gave it to us. How dare you expect us to disregard that or even to be ashamed of it? He intended us to be white, to live as Westmen, as white people. We have every right to want that and every right to resist policies that will change that. And I think we all know that anytime somebody says, you didn't earn that, that is a prelude to them saying, now give it to me. You didn't earn that, therefore give it up to me. Or in this case, to anybody else from the entire globe who wants to come in and enjoy what you have built. Because you didn't earn it. Even if I did earn it, they'd find a reason to say you shouldn't have it. Even if we did earn it, they'd find a reason to say you shouldn't have it. But in this case, the way I see it, it's even higher than if we obtained it on our own. God gave it to us. We were born that way. God formed us in this manner, in this image. That to me is even higher than if we earned it through our own effort or our parents earned it and passed it on to us. So that is, just to keep it simple, that is what I would advise anybody to say if and when their pastor tells them, don't be proud of your heritage, which means don't even be happy about your heritage. They're not talking about, idol worship. I don't know anybody that sets up idols and worships idols in their heritage, but maybe there's some people out there who do. But for the record, know that this pastor meant, by pride, he meant don't even be happy about it. Disregard it, rebuke it, give it up to other people's ways who are for some reason not wrong when they want to see their ways imposed. and you are wrong for wanting to see your ways imposed or even continue. That's my bit. I'll let you guys jump in now and comment.
When you were saying that, it kind of reminded me of the parable of the talents, where, if you remember, it's in Matthew chapter 25. He tells the parable Jesus does about a man who has 3 servants, and one he gives 5 talents to, one he gives 2 talents to, and one he gives 1 talent to. And for anyone who doesn't know the story, of course, I'm just explaining it. And the talents are certain amounts of money, and I believe in those days it's some kind of currency. And so the first two, the one with the 5 talents and the one with the 2 talents, they both, use those talents and put those resources to work, and then they earn more than what they had before. But the one with a single talent, he doesn't even bother to use it or do anything with it. And so when the master returns, he says basically, like, I didn't do anything with this talent. I just set it aside and I didn't make any use of it. And then the master condemns that servant, saying that he was wicked and he'll be rejected for his, unfaithfulness, for not using what he was given. And I think in a similar way, we could look at Western civilization, the projection of our biospirit, as a talent. It's an opportunity that God has given us to use our resources and use our abilities to spread the gospel to the world, to build up his kingdom. And if we simply neglect that, if we simply set that aside and say, well, it doesn't really matter that we have all this great stuff. If someone wants to just come and take it, fine, let them take it. We don't care. It's almost like an insult to God, because he gave us all these things and we're not putting them to use, and we're not using them to further his kingdom. So really, I think by just saying, well, I didn't earn it, so who cares? Like, that's really being wicked, and that's really spiteful toward God.
Yeah, and there are other things that we didn't earn. For instance, most of us will receive some kind of inheritance from our parents, and they most of the time they earned that money or that property many years ago, even before we were born, but they still intend for us to have it, and we're going to inherit it and make the best use of it. I mean, all over the Bible is inheritance, and your heritage, your inheritance. Plus, there's the parable of the talents, like you said, Ian, and the one servant didn't even, as the master said, he didn't even use it to collect usury. He didn't even use it to accumulate some interest. He just buried it in the backyard somewhere and dug it up when the master came back. And that's understood by everybody to be wrong.
It is funny that you brought up the story of the talents, because I was thinking of it as well. I would even expound on it further. The first thing I'll say about what this man said is, did anyone notice how he didn't say black or Jewish? Those yeah, there were specific ethnicities he didn't mention. He only said, I think, Japanese as a non-white one, which he knew Japanese people wouldn't get too upset with him about. But he picked the low-hanging fruit. He didn't challenge any of the actual, you know, ethnicities that would actually be upset by what he said. He only challenged specifically white people and one or two other ethnicities who typically don't make too much of a fuss about those things. Some of the most racially prideful people he didn't even mention, and I don't think that was by accident, which kind of reveals a lot in this person's mind and his dishonesty of what he's saying. And then going back to the story of the talents, he doesn't use the word equality, but again, a lot of people forget that equality is satanic. In hell, everyone is equal because Satan hates us all. Hierarchy is celestial. God, especially in the story of the talents, there is hierarchy. There are hardworking servants. There are lazy servants. And the end of the story of the talents, the servant who came back with 10 talents was given control of 10 cities. The servant who came back with 5 talents was given control of 5 cities. And the talent that the lazy servant didn't use was given to the servant who came back with 10 talents. So there is complete hierarchy in the law of God, where there are the lukewarm, there are the warm, and there are the cold. God differentiates everyone, by their efforts and by their achievements, by their faith, by any number of things that he expects of us, our courage, our willingness to serve. There are so many things that God separates us by. So this whole message that everybody's the same, just say Jesus and we're all good, like, it's so empty and it misses so much of what's in the Bible. And it really just shows the lack of understanding and the real lack of big picture that so many of these ministers don't see. They pick these tiny little excerpts, these 2 or 3 verses, and then make an hour-long speech about these 1 or 2 verses, and they contradict so much of what's in the Bible and so much is what's part of godly living. I mean, if you really read the Bible cover to cover, I read it to my older daughter every night. So I've read it cover to cover multiple times because of my children. They're a blessing from God. And everything is in the Bible, from how you should set up your cities, how you should set up your government, what kind of banking is acceptable or not. Virtually everything God gave us guidance on. And so many of these things, these preachers don't talk about. So when they come out and they try to, condemn people for, thinking that white people have some kind of property, because that's what it is. It's about property. And the Bible is very specific and has very, very strong rules about property rights, that basically white people don't own anything they've built. They don't get any credit for their culture or the proliferation of their culture. Everyone makes this big deal about democracy, and it's like, who spread it around the world? Who actually came up with it? The ancient Greeks, and through bloodshed. They kept it alive. And I know, to most of us who really have looked into philosophy, democracy is technically a dirty word. We think more of republicanism, and checks and balances as a better form of government. But simply just to use a word that these people use, they just pretend like it came out of the ether. And it didn't come from bloodshed and sweat. And it wasn't passed down from father to son for generations in order to survive. And it was. And you're right. We didn't earn our parents, but our parents earned us. Our mothers carried us and birthed us. And through great pain and sorrow did they bring us into this world. And through hard work and sweat of his brow, our fathers fed us so that we could become men, so that we could carry on what our fathers believed in, just as their fathers and their fathers did before them. So you're right. The youngest person in a family hasn't earned anything yet, but the entire family has earned that youngest member. And that youngest member will go on to earn something, hopefully. So to pretend like that's not the way life goes, and that does not bequeath us with responsibility to not only appreciate our ancestors and to venerate our culture, is really just, I mean, it's denying reality. It really is. Like, this person, who made this sermon, who gave this speech, didn't think deeper than the surface when he was really talking about these things. Because even us just watching it 10 seconds later, we can all think of 100 reasons why that's completely nonsensical. And even Christianity itself. I mean, Christianity, of course, is spread by the word, but it's also spread from father to son. The West, the faith, and the faith is the West. And we brought it to every shore. There wouldn't be Chinese Christians without Portuguese and British sailors. There wouldn't be Filipino Christians without the Spanish. There wouldn't be South American Christians without the Spanish. There wouldn't be African Christians without the French and the English. So even just the faith this man pretends to espouse is something that
You cut out?
Did you
Well,
get disconnected?
yeah, I think
Oh.
so. Well, yeah, gentlemen, you've made such good points here. I was just taking notes. Um, I have one rhetorical question to you all. So, if God gave us the West, then why didn't He give it to other races? And one other question: should you be ashamed of being born into a Christian family. It didn't earn it. Should you be ashamed of being born into a good Christian household?
No, absolutely not.
No, no, you should rejoice in it. And I think you made a very good point, John, about being proud versus rejoicing in something. And this pastor, I think he deliberately conflates it. He's not
Yeah,
being honest.
yeah. You could define pride as simple self-worship. I think what that looks like is what Gentile Bear was saying about not respecting hierarchy. I think pride usually boils down to refusal to accept hierarchy. If you take a sports analogy, if you're the best quarterback, you have every right to expect to be made the quarterback. But if you are not, then you have a duty pretty much to relinquish that role to the man who is. That's or else you would be guilty of the sin of pride. That's usually what I think it boils down to. I mean, yes, it can be old-fashioned idol worship and a graven image to something that you're worshiping, something like that. But I think it usually boils down to not respecting hierarchy.
Yeah, I think the issue of pride, I mean, there's different types of pride. I mean, there's pride that can be just like, as you say, excessive self worship or vanity, but there's also the concept of taking pride in your appearance or taking pride in your work. I mean, that doesn't mean you're being vain about it. It just means you care about it enough to put in the effort to do a good job. I want to look good. I want the work I do to be good. I mean, as Christians, are we not supposed to take pride in ourselves and, respect ourselves enough to honor what God gave us and do the best we can? I mean, that's the type of pride I think is good. And I think you could say that like racial or ethnic pride is along those same lines. It's about saying, I want to honor what I was given. I want to make the most of what I was given, and I want to do something good with it. And in this case, that good thing is our genetic biospiritual inheritance.
Yeah, good point. I always understood this sin of pride as being, ego. God hates this ego, like, and that goes back to what Jesus said. If you humble yourself, you will be, exalted. If you exalt yourself, you will be humiliated, right? Uh, that's not. I'm paraphrasing, but yeah, you made a good point. Pride isn't the same as pride. I mean, we should be proud of being Christians, right? You should say it with pride that you are a Christian. It says somewhere in the Bible that you should not, or yeah, you shouldn't be ashamed of Christ. So then you should be proud of being walking with Christ. I mean, that's how I see it. But that's not ego. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I see ego as excessive will, if that makes any sense. Excessive insistence on getting your way, even to the detriment of a higher good, even to the detriment of even to your own detriment. So it's almost. I mean, there's the old story of the man who fell off a ship with all his gold in a bag, and he drowned because he wouldn't let go of the gold, and the gold took him to the bottom of the sea. I mean, that's just one of those old classic stories. I mean, maybe that's not ego, but it's something like that. It's like you just can't you can't. What's the saying about cutting off your nose to spite your face? Probably not explaining it very well, but I think you probably catch my meaning.
No, no, you made a great point. Um, and yeah, I think even if we were to try and self-reflect, all of us know the difference between someone who thinks, oh, well, I'm white So therefore, I'm automatically great, even though I haven't achieved anything. Versus people like us who look at it and truly respect our history and what our ancestors achieve. And we think, wow, I really need to do something great so that I can be deserving of this family that I'm a part of. So many of us forget that race and ethnicity come from ethnos, and they're about birth. It's about family. A race is just a fancy word for a very large tree with many branches of the same family, which is what the greater Western kind is. And so many of us think that we need to earn, to be able to deserve to be a member of that group. And a lot of us know people who think that, oh, well, I'm white, so therefore I'm automatically awesome. And they're usually overweight. They usually walk around with a neck beard. And they're the kind of people that we know don't get it. And they are in the minority, and these people act like anyone who thinks that, it is good, to value, the group, the family that you're a part of, that somehow you're automatically that person when in fact you're not. And it's a dishonest misrepresentation, to say the least.
Yeah, and let me just make a brief point. You jog my memory. If anyone asks me what gives you the right to your lands, your institutions, the West, number one, it's what you said, Gentile Bear, earlier. Our maybe we didn't earn it, but our parents earned us, and we're going to respect what they're passing down to us. But it's also our nature, our biospirit. We're the only ones capable of maintaining it. The other races of man, they have their own strengths and talents, but they cannot even maintain what we have built, let alone rebuild it if necessary. We are the only ones who have the biospirit, which means instinct and inclinations and sensibilities and abilities to maintain it and, if necessary, build it again. And that gives us the right to what we have, in addition to the fact that our parents earned us, so to speak.
I guess there's also the question of what entitles these other people to come and take our land. If, like, say, well, it's not your land. Well, is it their land? I mean, if they just decide to show up, does it become theirs? I mean, I'm reminded of the commandment, thou shalt not covet, which, for those who don't understand the concept of coveting, it means to want to take what belongs to somebody else. I remember Dennis Prager explaining this. I mean, I'm not a big Dennis Prager guy, but, he was going through the 10 Commandments and explaining what they mean. And the example he gave is like, if you see something that someone else has and try to get, like the example he gave was, let's say your neighbor has a really nice car and you think, hey, I'd like a car like that. So I'm going to work hard and save my money so I can buy the same kind of car. That's not coveting. But if you say, like, I want that car, the one he has, to be mine, that's coveting. So since, if we have our homelands, our countries, I mean, those are ours. And if somebody wants to come and take our lands and our homelands and occupy them and use it for their benefit at our expense, that's coveting. And I think that, if we are Christians and we believe in the commandment of thou shalt not covet, that sort of thing should absolutely be condemned.
Well, absolutely. And in the commandment of covet, again, there is that inference of property. You know, if everything in the world belonged to everyone, then you couldn't covet because you could take what you want. There would be nothing to steal. You know, it infers, and again, the Bible even directly states someone can own something. It is theirs, and they can give it to their children. And like I said, when you remember that race is just a giant family of people bequeathing things to their children over and over again, it doesn't give anyone else the right to our area. Similarly, it doesn't give us the right to anyone else's either. And there were times when people of all different groups have violated that principle, and we condemn that at all points. But yeah, to simply say that nothing belongs to you or that you can't ever own something, including membership to your extended family, it really just is denying God outright. God invented property rights. He made it so that a man by his brow can work and earn something, and he can keep it and pass it on, just as he passes on and gives us everything that we have. I mean, it's like I said, these pastors, they miss the point of the Bible by so much. Our fathers are meant to be the image of God for us as children until we become men, and then God is our eternal Father. There is this layered passing on of this morality from father to son. And if certain groups do it, they're rewarded. And if certain groups don't, then they're not. And we should all be free. Africans should be free to make whatever civilizations they want to make, free of our influence and interference. And we should be able to make ours free from anyone else's interference and influence, just as the East Asians can or anyone else can. And this automatic, trying to break down the idea of property, that we can't own anything or that it truly doesn't belong to us, is satanic. It really is satanic.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah, you beat me to it. No, the only thing I had left to add was that clip we showed at the beginning, the pastor that kicked all this off. He is the pastor of a mega church called Saddleback, and I've actually decided to stop calling them mega churches. I've decided to call them for-profit churches. I think that's accurate. I don't think anyone would dispute that. But he is I think the head pastor of that very large for-profit church called Saddleback. And most people that go to those enormous churches aren't too concerned with theology and scripture anyway, I don't think. But in case there's anybody out there who is wondering, I hope this podcast helps. And the other comment I was going to make is the little joke about gluttonous pastors that Northern Westman made at the beginning of the podcast there. I'm the one who's usually making these little comments because I think it's really I think I know I'm not the only one who has noticed that most pastors are overweight. Even in countries where the majority of people are maybe overweight or even obese, a very large pastor is a bad look from a lot of different angles. They don't even look the part. They don't even pass the eye test. You could tell that they are not disciplined. They're maybe slothful, gluttonous, indulgent. A very big part of being a good Christian is denying yourself indulgence and hedonistic pleasure, eating too much, drinking too much, etc. So if you look at a pastor and could already tell that they don't appear to be disciplined in their daily habits, why would we think that they are disciplined spiritually? Why would we trust them to be our pastor? They don't even pass the eye test. And I've kept quiet about this for a while, but I'm tired of seeing it. Frankly, I'm tired of seeing one after another fat pastor. To be frank, it's easier to name the ones who aren't fat. Paul Washer, that's about it. Paul Washer and Steve Lawson are trim pastors. I think the rest are overweight, and so I'm the one making these little comments. They usually originate with me, for the record. I own that.
Fair enough. But yeah, it was a funny joke. Uh, yeah, it seems to be pervasive, the gluttonous pastors. And I love the MC that you coined, for-profit churches. That is so accurate, not mega churches.
Right. I mean, they're the reason we most Christians are, or at least should, eschew those churches is not because they're large. It's not because of their size, although that does kind of defeat the purpose of a church. I mean, if your pastor doesn't even know your name, that's a problem. I doubt your pastor's praying for you or anybody in church is praying for you if they don't even know your name. At a certain point, a church becomes too large. But I think in principle, what's truly wrong with them, what's even more wrong, is not their size. It's the fact that they're trying to cram as many people in the door as they can to increase their profits. And then that's That's what I think is truly wrong about them.
Yeah. I sometimes call these pastors pop preachers because they're just preaching what the world wants to hear. But I mean, Jesus said that he was going to, divide households. Son against father. Daughter against mother, etc. He said things. Jesus said things that the world didn't want to hear, and ultimately he was killed for it. Crucified for it. So, yeah, I think it's a fitting term, pop preacher. They're not really faithful. I mean, you're not really supposed to say it. I'm sorry. But, I mean, it's kind of true. These are false teachers. They're not committed. They might as well just read from CNN, at the altar. It's sad. Pop preacher pandemic. We did have another topic.
Yeah, that's very true. And, that really does bring up a good point. And it allows us to ask a lot of questions about not just this man, but as you said, a lot of these preachers, a lot of them are overweight. And a lot of them, their sole source of income, is this for-profit church that they run. And they really don't exemplify any, of the traits that a minister should. Not only should they not be overweight, but when was the last time any of us really think this guy went out in his backyard and worked the earth, as God would want him to? When was the last
fat-
time he probably fixed his own plumbing, or exercised? Really got out into nature and stretched his body and exercised and really just enjoyed and appreciated. Again, he brings up, the group that we're a member of, that's just a gift from God. Well, so is our body. And he doesn't even appreciate his own body. So why would we expect him to preach that you should appreciate anything else? This person doesn't even take the respect to take care of himself. So it really should, for most reasonable people, shoot down his credibility. This guy, the only thing he probably takes pride in is the fact that he gets to earn money preaching. And
Amen.
what would his wife say about him? Would his wife say that he helps out around the house, that he's active, is he good with his children? It really does bring up a lot of those questions of character. The ability to get up there and just say nice things at the pulpit does not necessarily mean you have good character. And like John said, when you can't even pass the eye test, it really does bring up like how flawed of a character is this person and how disingenuous is it? Just like Northern Westman is saying, he's a pop preacher. He's not going to say anything that's unpopular because that's going to then affect either his membership or his numbers. And John, you bring up a great point. Like churches can be too big, and the vast majority of them are. If we look all through Jesus's ministry, he was constantly losing followers because he would say things that were unpopular or critical of what people were doing around him. He would point out the flaws and say, you shouldn't do this. How often has this pastor looked at his congregation and pointed out and said, hey, you shouldn't be wearing pajamas to church? Because if you wouldn't wear that outfit on a date, why would you present yourself in church before God dressed poorly? Has he ever talked to his congregation about things like that? Everyone in the background behind him was just wearing t-shirts. They weren't even dressed semi-nicely or dressed casual. So he doesn't enforce any standards at all in his church. He doesn't expect people to improve themselves. He doesn't point out any flaws. When was last time any of us think he really gave us sermon about, hey, I'm walking around the congregation and I'm hearing too much foul language. We should all really reflect and try to use less foul language. When has he ever tried to curb the flock and actually improve his members by demanding that they do something to fix themselves? I'm willing to wager never, because that wouldn't earn him any money.
Amen. Wow, spot on. That was a fiery preaching. Thank you. So true. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. Indeed, they were all wearing T-shirts. It's a good observation. Uh, John, Ian, would you like to comment?
I think I've said my piece. Ian might have something to say, but I think I've said my piece. And I just anybody listening to this podcast, it's a shame that we have to formulate these psychological defenses the way we do. Most of the time, we can't do so beforehand. Most of the time, I think you probably just show up to church and your pastor says something like this guy said, and you probably usually don't have the perfect response ready made and ready to go. But eventually, we'll have a whole library of meme curatives figured out here, and we'll post them on a website somewhere, and you'll be prepared for anything your pastor says, because they're laying awake at night dreaming this stuff up. I guarantee it. They seem to enjoy it, and so we have to. We want to provide you with the psychological defense for the psychological attack that's being put upon you.
Amen. John, you crack me up sometimes. They're lying in their bed, thinking of these things.
They're
Yeah, you've also told me the same joke, but in a different context. I'm not going to repeat it here.
I will. I won't get too deep into it. There are. It's not the white race, but there are some races who are very, very, very creative in the names they give their children. And I'm convinced they lay awake at night for months until they find the perfect name, because I can't imagine any other way they come up with these names. I think they lay awake at night for 6 months until they finally got the perfect name, and then they name their child.
Oh man. Anyway,
I'm guilty of this. I've already planned out all of my kids' names, and I was very methodical about it.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, if you're going to call a child by a name for the rest of their life, you should probably make sure it's something good.
yeah, but we're thinking about something very, very special here.
I know. I'm just saying.
Anyway,
to be fair, white people do name their kids some questionable things sometimes. But I mean, my gripe with white people is usually they'll name their child something like, and I hope nobody here has a boy named Cody. One of my cousins is named Cody, and I thought, he's going to be 50 one day, and he'll still be called Cody. That's not. That sounds like a boy's name. It's a fine name for a boy, but at a certain point, I think they outgrow it. That's what I think white people do wrong. They don't they don't realize that they'll outgrow some of these names at some point.
Well, that's true. Yeah, we make the mistake of naming our kids nicknames. Like Cody is a nickname for Dakota. So if he had been named Dakota and people just called him Cody, that'd be one thing. But we're not as bad as some groups who name their kids actually like Junior, like that's their first name, or they name their kids Sam instead of something longer. We have made the mistake, instead of naming a boy Jonathan, we just name him John. And we really do have to get away from that and give our children, like you said, like manly names at birth, and then we can call them a nickname when they're young. And I'm not too embarrassed to share my daughter's names. They're still young, and obviously no one can find them just by a first name. But my eldest daughter's name is Evangeline. People call her Eva, for short, or they call her Angie. But her name is Evangeline, and it's a long name, and it means to, just like evangelize, it means to preach the word. I literally named my daughter to preach the word. And then my second daughter's name is Guinevere. I named her because it's an old English name. It has a lot of meaning, but everyone calls her Gwyn, for fun because she's a baby. But when she is an older woman, she will have, an adult name. So like you said, yeah, we make the mistake of naming our kids nicknames. We called our best friend Johnny when we were kids. So we think Johnny is a name when really it's a nickname.
that's a beautiful name, Gunnevere. In Icelandic, we have a similar Gunnvör.
Oh yeah, it is Germanic. Yeah, it's Old English.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm sure it's very similar.
Yeah, nice. But I
We'll
did
have to
have.
do a podcast about names now.
Yeah, well, that was a little detour. We did have another topic. Are you? Do you need to go or
Me? Oh no, I'm sorry. I had
you
to
guys?
re-log on because I lost audio, so I didn't hear the last few things you guys were saying, so I had to hang up and re-climb in.
All right, no worries. Well, we did have another topic, but it's a topic that I recommended 2 weeks ago before Easter, and I think it was before Easter. And I can't remember what I was going to say, but the topic was to learn to wait for God. That is, being patient, to follow God's plan and be patient. And I can't remember. There was something that triggered me to want to discuss this because I was like impatient or something, and I need to learn patience. I was trying to remember it during the podcast, but I can't remember.
Yeah, no, I think patience is a very, big topic. And I think again, that's one of those self-improvement topics that so many pastors never talk about. Your pastors will never tell you what you need to do to better yourself.
Mm.
They always just want to pat you on the back for believing in Jesus and for showing up to church and putting money in the plate. They never want to be critical. But yeah, I think talking about patience would probably be a really great topic. I'm sure we could all really expound on that.
Absolutely.
We could even segue into husbands needing patience, and needing patience with our children and children needing patience with their parents, right? I mean, there's just that. Wow, that is a wide topic.
Yeah,
Are we going to talk about it now, or are we going to save it for next time?
maybe next time.
I was going to say that'll be a long one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like if I were to participate in that, I'd need some time to prepare my thoughts on some of these things.
Yes.
I assume we're going to cut out some of this discussion just because it just kind of. I mean, we're still recording, so
Yeah, I can just close it.
Well, I mean, should
Yeah,
we sign up?
you can always edit it out later.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. We are Western Kind for Christ, and you are listening to the Disciple Hour, episode 4. I am Northern Westman. I'm going to close it for now. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.